So let's first look at the vision and mission of John Adams Academy. John Adams Academy is restoring America's heritage by developing servant leaders who are keepers and defenders of the principles of freedom for which our founding fathers pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. Now, all of our programs, services, and systems of John Adams Academy are designed to achieve this vision and mission of developing servant leaders. Now, let me provide some clarity to begin with around that first half of this statement, around the vision portion of restoring America's heritage. Next slide. So, America's heritage is a tradition of self-governing and virtuous citizens who unite in pursuit of unalienable, certain, and universal principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's for all people, right? It is a tradition that is passed on to each generation, and each generation strives to make these principles available to all and to preserve them for future generations. This heritage is grounded in the principles of liberty and freedom that are embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. And these principles include the existence of objective truth and natural law, which governs all humanity, that individuals are endowed by their creator with unalienable rights, that governments are instituted to secure these rights and derive their just power from the consent of the governed, that good governments are inherently limited with checks and balances and separations of powers, the inseparability of individual liberty and personal responsibility, and justice under the law for all people. Next slide. The core values of John Adams Academy are what we use to build the culture that provides and enriches the educational environment. They govern interactions between staff, scholars, and families. They are the language that is used to express our leadership and character building education program, and they are essential in developing servant leaders. These core values, they also help to create a welcoming and supporting culture among our scholar body. So our scholars memorize and recite our core values on a regular basis. Our teachers lead scholars in discussions of the core values when found in classical literature or when otherwise appropriate. And our academy conducts assemblies, mentoring classes, service learning projects, and other activities that are centered on our core values. And I would also encourage you to go to our website actually for the meanings of each of these core values. Looking at the names, you can see that they're very inspiring and they're in alignment with that mission and vision. But it's really important to understand what each of these means, and we have that further developed on our website. Next slide. So just as we can acknowledge that liberty is the grounding principle for America, we can also see how liberty applies to an educational philosophy. So one person cannot force another person to learn. That's really important. A teacher cannot force an education upon a child. We also know that every child is unique. A one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach to education doesn't address each individual child's unique abilities, passions, and goals. At John Adams Academy, we believe that the primary educator of the child is the parent. No one knows your child better than you do. The role of the academy is not to replace the parent, but to come alongside the parent and alongside the scholar to provide support, resources, and the environment necessary for learning to occur. And then to inspire the scholar to take ownership of their own education. We strive to teach scholars how to think, not what to think. The nature of mankind dictates that an education should be instituted to support the liberty to pursue one's intrinsic potential for special excellence. As such, our American classical leadership education respects a scholar's natural state as a free agent to act, and not merely as an object to be acted upon, with an intrinsic potential for greatness. As mentors respect each scholar's sovereign right to their own intrinsic potential, the teacher as a mentor seeks to inspire and invite scholars to develop their potential. Next slide. So this next slide is a Venn diagram that shows you our classical education model. So at John Adams Academy, we utilize the classical education using the trivium in order to provide our liberal arts education. And a lot of us are familiar with the term grammar schools, right? And this is actually the way schools used to be throughout American education. We had elementary schools, which we still refer to as grammar schools, but we've stopped referring to our middle and high schools as logic and rhetoric schools, right? But that first stage of learning, that first stage of development is that grammar phase. And that's where kids are just really excited to know stuff, right? If you've got a toddler or you've got somebody in preschool or kindergarten or those early elementary grades, they are just super excited when they know something and they can share that with you, right? It's about the what, facts, data, terms, basic skills. It's the building blocks for education. In order for me to know anything about a subject, I first have to know the things that make up the subject, right? But then as I get older and I get more into the concrete reasoning and thinking, and I get in those middle school years, I start to get a little bored, right? And if you've got a child or ever had a child in those middle school ages, they tend to push back significantly more, right? They don't just want to know stuff. It's not enough that mom and dad has told them something. They want to know why. It's getting to the part of understanding. Well, that's natural curiosity. So rather than shutting that down, education should work with that natural transition into those middle school years of wanting to know how things work together. You know, why are things the way they are? And then we move into the rhetoric phase, which tracks along with high school. And that high school rhetoric stage is all about wisdom. You take the knowledge, those building blocks, and you take the understanding of how it fits together. And now you get to the applying it to the world around you. How do I use this to not only my benefit, but the benefit of the community and those around me? Susan Wise Bauer, an author and a person who works in the homeschool and in the classical education world, she summarizes the rhetoric stage the following way. She says, rhetoric is the art of expression. During the rhetoric stage, the traditional high school years, the student learns to express herself with fluency, grace, elegance, and persuasiveness. Since self-expression is one of the greatest desires of adolescence, high school students should have training in the skills of rhetoric so that they can say clearly and convincingly what's on their mind. Next slide. So within our classical education model, we use classics, right? And along with those classics, that includes primary sources, and those can come in a lot of ways and shapes and forms. So if you're talking about classic novels, it could be like in elementary, something as simple as Little House on the Prairie or Aesop's Fables or Treasure Island, something that tells a vibrant, rich story, but conveys, you know, universal truths across time that can be used as a vehicle for teaching. In mathematics, it might be the Elements by Euclid, who was the father of geometry. In the science, it might be On the Origin of Species by Darwin, rather than using a textbook that is somebody's opinion of what Darwin was saying. Well, let's read Darwin and let's see what he actually said and who he was studying and what his theories actually are. It could be things like the Federalist Papers or John Locke's treatise on government, right? These primary sources are so important in a classical education because they connect children with the source material and they strip away the filter that a textbook presents, because the textbook is, like I said, somebody else's opinion of what is important to know from the work. Well, why should I read someone else's opinion of the work when I can read the work itself and I can struggle through as a scholar, as a person who's trying to learn this subject, I can struggle through it and I can own it myself. So when we talk about classics, classics are really the greatest works of creation. They encompass great art, music, literature, documents, speeches. They can be science experiments, mathematical proofs, natural wonders in the world, and they can be virtuous deeds of figures throughout history. A classic is something that inspires the very best within us. It's revealing what is essentially true, good, and beautiful. It exhibits the virtues and values of a civilization at its apex. A classic has universality. It speaks across the millennia to people of any age and any culture. And a classic is never finished saying what it has to say, and it can be experienced again and again. A classic work of art or literature has a great theme and noble expression. And that's what we want to fill our scholars with. Great works that inspire them and build them up and uplift them, right? None of this pop culture stuff. A John Adams Academy education delivers a world-class classical education by facilitating scholar engagement with these greatest books of the Western tradition. We seek to inspire our scholars to become lifelong learners who have the ability to identify and understand, seek and share what is true, noble, and good. Next slide. Another essential element on our program, and this is across all ages. So I have here an image of high school scholars in a Socratic discussion, but this takes place as early as TK, right? In all of our grade levels, from transitional kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, the scholars are learning how to interact with each other, how to respectfully share, and how to respectfully disagree. So as I talk about Socratic discussion, know that this is happening in every grade level appropriate to their age and maturity level. So when we talk about Socratic discussion, we need to realize that there's a vital aspect of teaching that can never be implemented so well in lectures as by dialogue, by discussion. Each one of us brings certain fundamental ideas to education which must be made explicit before learning can advance. Discussion is the optimum means to bring them forth. The scholar must accomplish the thinking. The teacher, as a good facilitator, only assists in the labor of doing that thinking. Discussion, because it is an activity, engages the scholar's mind more so than straightforward lectures. Instead of passively hearing the instructor's thoughts, the scholar engaged in dialogue is required to work his or her own mind, to form and express his or her own thoughts. The challenge of discussion pushes him or her to ever higher efforts. The scholar reads more. They read more carefully, knowing that they're soon going to be explaining and debating their understanding of the text with their classmates. If the scholar does this on a daily basis, this heightened intensity leads to intellectual habits that last a lifetime. Dialogue with another often helps us to clarify further to ourselves just what we really do mean, especially when the others are asking the right questions. A good teacher is able, through the right questions, to make us aware of our most basic ideas in the light of which we are able to make judgments about other things. Next slide. So that's a high-level overview of our model and our philosophy. And now I'd like to turn the time over to Carlos Iniguez, and maybe Carlos, you can give a quick introduction of yourself, share who you are, and then take your portion.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Once again, I'm Carlos Iniguez, and I'm the Outreach and Compliance Specialist at the Academy. And I've had the great fortune of being with the Academy since its second year of operation, and actually knew about the Academy before its existence. In fact, I'll also mention here that Mr. Gonzalez, he was very humble, but it was a founding board member. So a few of us were with the Academy, knew about the Academy and since its inception. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm the former Dean of Scholars, and then I was also the Director of Servant Leadership. So Mr. Gonzalez and I kind of came off the administration, as he went to work in the administration as well for a certain period of time. And then we were both able to then join what we refer to as the Nonprofit Services Division, which supports all three campuses. And particularly we work with the new school development and things that have to do with government relations and compliance and all that neat stuff that goes on to running a school. So I'm thrilled to be with you this evening. So, as Mr. Gonzalez was talking about, these key points that make John Adams Academy different are, carefully illuminated for you. And I know that's a lot of information, but we want you to be able to understand really what is the difference in education that you are choosing as a parent, but more importantly, what is it that will continue to inspire your young one to continue to reach their potential. And part of that for us is servant leadership. And so with servant leadership, I mean, you're like, okay, how does this type of leadership, or this idea of leadership, factor into a great education? And more importantly, for us, we have to ask, okay, how does this factor into how we restore America's heritage? So we restore America's heritage by developing servant leaders who are empathetic, who are caring, who are driven, and who use their knowledge and their inner compass to have an immediate impact on those people around them. So once again, this idea of a servant leader is part and parcel of the American classical leadership education that encourages citizens to put the needs of others above themselves. It's a very, very simple concept, but it's something that's intertwined with everything that we do. So an American classical leadership education is John Adams Academy's unique way of educating our scholars and educating scholars that produces servant leaders, just like those who founded our great country. Servant leader is a type of leader or a type of person who has vision. They understand the past. They see the ideal, and then they voluntarily and proactively act for others to achieve that ideal. So a servant leader is really just a servant first, and they're driven by that inner compass and has the virtues that embody core values with a natural desire to serve and empower others. And I think you can agree with me that, when we talk about leadership, that this type of leadership is really not the type of leadership that's extolled in our communities now, is not really what's put in common, in common practice, as we see with leaders around us. And that is leaders who put others first. And if we really, can come down to brass tacks, we're going to understand that the education of tomorrow's leaders is going to determine the freedom and prosperity and the integrity of the next generation. And we'll really need young people who have a greater than self mentality and who love to serve and love to serve others if we are going to reach those ideals, as Mr. Gonzalez stated earlier when he opened up regarding the promises of liberty. So once again, servant leaders are just simply those who want to put others first. So one of the things that makes us unique here at the Academy is our model of mentoring. And mentoring is something that's a little bit different than kind of the student-teacher dynamic. And I'll get into that a little bit. But for the most important point regarding mentoring is that all great leaders throughout history have shared a couple of common things and a couple fundamental things to their education. And that was they read the classics and they had great mentors. And a mentor is really just an individual of high character who can help guide a scholar both on an intellectual basis and with their moral development while respecting their sovereignty and the intrinsic potential that they have as an individual. And mentors have directly affected nearly all the greatest leaders throughout history, especially in their formidable years. And the formula was really simple, but yet, once again, it's profound. If you take a look at most of the great leaders that we see in history, you'll see that they read the classics and they discussed them with mentors who were passionate about learning, and their passion for learning was contagious. And these mentors saw a great potential within these future leaders and encouraged them to stretch their capacity by expecting quality work from them. And so really what a mentor does is helps a young person apply the life lessons that we get from reading the classics to real life problems and answering those age-old questions. So for us at the Academy, mentoring is first, it's a mindset for us, because really what we have is when we see ourselves as mentors, we see ourselves as partners in learning. And in education, sometimes we get that backwards. Sometimes, we put on the hat where we're going to directly lecture you to death. And unfortunately, we can't do some back and forth like we normally do when we're in person tonight, where we could kind of model this for you. But as you, I'm sure, can tell, after a certain period of time, when someone's just lecturing at you and talking, we kind of lose focus. And we understand that. Mentoring, on the other hand, is a way of using that Socratic discussion that Mr. Gonzalez talked about, using the classics as a focal point, and coming alongside of a young person to really find out what it is they see, what it is that they know, but more importantly, where it is they want to go. And that mentoring relationship is something that's key. We also have a mentoring program here at the Academy where folks just like you, community members, grandparents, staff, administrators, teach classes based on their passions. So we have folks in our normal circumstances who come on campus, and we'll share a passion for 6 to 8 weeks with our scholars in what we refer to as our mentoring program. And the idea behind the mentoring program is much like an elective program, but it's a chance for our young people to come in contact with passionate, skilled mentors who are, once again, on fire about a discipline, or who have a passion or a love for something. Because we know that when our scholars get next to people who are driven and who love a passion, they too will hopefully be able to explore what drives them. So whether that's art or music, or for some it's sports, or for some it's leadership, for some it's history, they'll be able to find that special excellence inside of them. So by combining these different parts of our program, the leadership, the servant leadership, the classics, the Socratic discussion, really what happens is that you come with servant leaders who are once again leaders in their homes and leaders in their communities, in their country. At every John Adams Academy campus, there's a crest, and our crest greets most of our visitors as they walk through the door. And in Latin, there's this beautiful phrase that says, "Servimus, decimus, precellimus," which means we serve, we lead, we excel. And ultimately, that is our call to servant leadership. Service to others is paramount in everything that we do. It's paramount to our human existence. And really, a servant leader is a self-governing citizen who is dedicated to causes greater than self. And particularly the cultivation and propagation of the defense of liberty and the pursuit of happiness for self and for others. And once again, driven by that inner compass, we seek excellence in everything we do. Not so much as a benchmark for honor or for self-acclaim, but in hopes that we can live to our fullest potential. And that's something that the classics allow us to engage with, how to live to our fullest potential. And what's key here is that for each of us, there lives inside of us what we refer to as a special excellence, or a special thing that we were created or intended for. And we seek to do our best to be in the fullness of our being so that we are empowered to excel in our service towards others. And really, we believe that when we are at service to others, we are at our best. And so for us at the Academy, excellence is not just a fixed standard that we have, for self-measurement, right? I was great. A measurement tool, a yardstick. No, but really it is a guide for us to consistently ask ourselves, did we do our best, not only for ourselves, but for those around us and for those in our care? And once again, this is something that's on the table every day as part of our academics. It's part of our mission. It's part of our core value. And it's entwined in everything that we do, whether it's reading a classic or whether it's in a disciplinary talk or a mentoring talk with a young person who might be off track, or maybe in a discussion at the board meeting level. Right? These principles of our mission are really what drives us and makes us different at John Adams Academy. So the big question, obviously all of you are going to have here is really, what is the competitive advantage that my son or daughter is going to have by enrolling and graduating from John Adams Academy. There's a couple things on the screen for you to consider, but I think the most important thing that we've identified is that our scholars are going to gain the skills and confidence necessary to thrive in any endeavor that they choose. And we arrived at that by doing some extensive polling with our scholars and our graduates and our alumni who have left and gone on to the world, and whether it be at university or at a junior college, or whether they're in the military. And we asked them, what is it that you think that we did when you were here at John Adams Academy? And over, they told us that we gave them the skills necessary to be the best at what they were doing right now, whether that was in the military or at the university, that they had the right to reason, but more importantly, the ability to know how to think. The greatest thing in talking to our kids is to know and to watch them grow into thoughtful problem solvers and skillful thinkers. And more importantly, to be young people of character and integrity. And so, through this classical liberal arts training that they receive, including the Socratic discussions and, service-based learning, school-wide scholar government, public speaking, mentoring, working with others, and the experiences that they have, we refer to as transformational leadership experiences. And really what helps build confidence and understanding, character, and practical skill. So we believe that our scholars will be able to identify and pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. And really that is providing them the success that they need, and the success for any foundation to any future, but more importantly, the success that every child deserves. So we're going to continue to move on here. And of course, I don't have the video up here, Mr. Gonzalez. Didn't see that, so we're gonna have to skip past that slide before, if you want to go ahead and take over there. Mr. Gonzalez, are you there?
So yeah, so why don't you just go ahead and pull that up?
Okay, give me a second. All right.
Yeah, while you do that. So just to tag on to Mr. Iniguez's comments, when we talked to our alumni who've gone on, we saw a common theme throughout their responses to us. They said that they were more than prepared for college, and they felt like they were even better prepared than their peers that came from other schools, because at university they were reading books for maybe the second or third time, because they'd already read them and they'd already had Socratic discussions about these works at John's Academy. Because when they get to high school, they're doing some university level work. Some of the requirements for graduation are that they write a thesis, and then they also defend that thesis to a panel, and they also do a public speech, and they do a service project that each graduate is responsible for. So before they graduate, whether it's their junior year or their senior year, they identify a need in the community, and they develop the service project, and they go out, they organize it, and they deliver this project. So whether it be fundraising or whether it be actual hands on ground. So they get a lot of experience in our model that prepares them, as this slide said, for life, not just for college, because college is one chapter. College is very important, right? And I think a lot of times parents focus on college, and they don't realize that just as important as that higher education is, it's important that my child become a virtuous person of character and integrity, that has the skills to thrive once they're out of college, right? So we want them not only to get to college, but to be successful there and beyond.
All right, I had the video pulled up here, so I'm going to share the screen, Mr. Gonzalez, and then we'll go from there. Just double check and let me know that you can see the video.
Okay.
It's a tremendous responsibility to shape a young child's mind. It will inspire them, it will challenge them, it will bring them to places they never thought they could go.
To develop them into leaders, to learners, and great souls.
Education has to be more than just simply teaching kids facts. It needs to be able to show kids how to apply what they're learning to the world around them.
Greatness is built on true principles, and they're always true. We can become who we were meant to be, and we can do that through the way we're educated. For me, it's a classical leadership education.
As I started to read the writings of the founding fathers, they inspired me. The idea was freedom. Charter schools are built on the idea of freedom.
In the last 100 years, a public school education has been for everyone, and it's tried to be everything for everyone, but it was never meant to be that. Not that we don't need public school, we do, but we need more than that.
As a charter school, we have the unique opportunity to develop and build our own curriculum. We meet the state standards. As a matter of fact, we exceed the state standards in all areas of our curriculum and academics. But we're free to take the time to fully explore that often a traditional school moves quickly through because of the scope and sequence that they're required to maintain in their education.
We're trying to look at primary source documents, getting away from textbooks, and go through Socratic dialogue and discussions about those events, and really have an in-depth understanding of what it is they're learning.
Not only are we studying the greatest books that have ever been written, but we are studying the greatest people and their contributions to our society and why they changed the world. The classics can be read, written, sung. They can be painted.
We want them to be people with values and principles. Development of servant leaders is a key component to our educational program. Our older scholars often step into classrooms of small children where they read alongside them and explore great ideas, and they impact one another through mentoring.
We have dedicated teachers to teach the way they've always wanted to teach, but never felt like they could. It's about inspiration.
We want our scholars to leave wanting more, always wanting to grow, and always wanting to serve.
There is no goalpost to say, you're done. And that beauty of discovering and becoming is self-perpetuating.
We need you to be part of this freedom education. It's a more noble mission than just a classical education. Our goal is to continue to live our passion and to open as many John Adams Academies as possible in every community that desires one.
All right, well, that was our time. Now it's your time. So we're going to turn it over to you guys for questions and answers. So if you guys have any follow-up questions that you want based on the information we've presented, or if there's something else you want to know about program, this is your time to to ask us. So Mr. Iniguez, how would you like them to do this? Would you like them to utilize the chat feature? Do you want them using the chat box?
Yeah, I think the best way to do it is to have them either raise their hand in the participant section or type the questions in the chat.
I do see a raised hand for Jody
Yeah.
Hanson. Jody's got a raised hand.
Excellent. I have to see if we can unmute Jody here. Jody, are you able to unmute there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just got it. Thank you.
Excellent.
I'm having a really hard time imagining what the classroom is like. Because we can't do a campus tour this year, can you kind of paint a picture of what the DK classroom might look like?
So I wish I could take you all into the classroom right now, because that is where the magic happens. When we go on a tour and we walk into the classroom, it is really exciting. I can't step foot inside the schools without constantly asking myself the question, where was this education when I was going to school? Why didn't I have this? And how do I make sure everybody else gets this opportunity, right? Because this is something I want to go back to school every time I step foot in the classroom. Mr. Iniguez, how would you describe, because you almost can't do it justice, you almost have to see it and be on a tour. How would you describe the classroom in a way that would do it justice?
Yeah, I think in a very real sense, for the most part, we're a traditional classroom. So when you walk in, you're going to see a teacher at the front of the classroom. You're going to see a whiteboard, and you're going to see all the things that you're normally used to seeing inside of a classroom, is desks and chairs and kiddos and scholars. But one thing that you'll notice right from the get-go is really the level of engagement. And it's really no secret, but a lot of times people come to us and they sit in our learning environments and they say, how come the kids are so engaged? And, for us, there's really no secret sauce. It goes kind of back to what I said in my comments. We know that when you have great content and an inspiring mentor, the end product is going to be engaged scholars. And so I think what's going to make us most different at the outset is going to be that level of engagement, but more important, the self-driven instruction. And what I mean by that is that our scholars take to heart the core value of scholar-empowered learning. They're encouraged to reach out and to grab ideas and to use their reasoning in order to not only gain information and bring it down themselves, but to learn how to share it with others. And the constant use of questioning strategies really elicits this thinking that is in constant pursuit of trying to figure out what is true, what is noble, what is beautiful. And so those are things that you just don't find in any of the classroom.
Yeah, and Jody, you would also ask specifically about kindergarten, right? And so in kindergarten, you're going to have the rich, vibrant colors. It's going to be decorated appropriately for kindergarten. You're going to see the scholars' artwork displayed. You're going to have all those normal things that you would have, but you also would walk in, you would see the children engaged in circle time, in which they're practicing that Socratic discussion and dialogue. It could be something as simple as sharing for a few minutes about their favorite color, right? It doesn't have to be highbrow stuff where they're busting open, a treatise on government, but just practicing sharing their favorite color with their friends in a respectful way is a really good, exciting thing. But they're practicing things through song. They're really, again, discovering that joy and that love of learning in those grades. Because that grammar phase we talked about, it's about acquiring knowledge. It's about acquiring information. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to browbeat kids at this age and just kind of overwhelm them and fry their brains. You want them to passionately love learning and be excited by it. So that's really what those classrooms feel like.
And I'll add this, the one thing that is pretty amazing is you can imagine in a TK or kindergarten class, the teacher up front during story time with the kids in circle, and the teacher's reading that great piece of literature, right? And she says, and then on the next page, this is going to happen. And do you think this is going to happen? She starts asking questions and the kids are raising their hands. And just imagine that in those discussions, when using those questioning strategies, we use the language of the core values to talk about virtue and character, which is very consistent with what we do in the upper division philosophy class, where once again, a teacher sits down with that primary source and they're reading a very, very compelling work, and they're able to ask the scholars, what is justice? And the scholars are able to engage in primary sources and to look once again at the facts and be able to interpret that set of facts.
And Carlos, just to tag on for an important design element for kindergarten. So anybody that's got a prospective kindergartner, one of the things I love about our model is it's a half-day model. We think it's a really long time to expect a kindergartner at the age of 5 to go a full school day from 8 to 3. And so we have an AM and a PM session for our kindergartners. So 2 different classes, one comes in the morning, one comes in the afternoon. And what we do is they share a classroom and they share teachers. So in every kindergarten classroom, there are 2 credentialed teachers and an instructional aide. So in a classroom of 30 kids, you would have 3 teaching adults that are there. So you really have a 10-to-1 ratio for your kindergartners. And same thing for TK. Our TK class sizes average around 25, and you have an AM and a PM credential teacher and an instructional aide. So I think that's an important element as well for parents, knowing that you don't have 30 kindergartners with 1 teacher in a classroom. I think that's a big deal. And I see some other hands also.
Actually, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm going to go to the chat box here because we're bouncing back between both of them. You can't see the questions in the chat box, so I'll alternate between the 2 of them here. Genevieve says that a great question. How do you balance state standards or state standards and requirements with the classical model that we've described?
Yeah, so as a public charter school, we're required to teach all of the state standards. We are also required to do the state assessments to ensure that we're actually testing the standards. And so the difference between us and the traditional public school is we have the freedom and flexibility to come up with our own curriculum and our own model of how we deliver that information. And so we've done that in an American classical leadership education model. So we're still folding in all those state curriculum, but we're teaching it through our own methods and our own curriculum. I said curriculum, state standards, but through our own curriculum. To give you an example, so let's say in 4th grade, the state standards require teaching westward expansion, the establishment of California as a state, right? The statehood for California, the gold rush. These are all elements of 4th grade standards in social studies. Well, rather than giving them a textbook in which we would put forward just a bland state curriculum, what we would do is we would have our scholars reading Little House on the Prairie, and the teacher would facilitate discussions because here's a story, here's a novel, classic, in which they're talking about westward expansion, and you have a family on the wagon train heading west. And you can teach those standards, right, through the development of our own curriculum, utilizing these great stories, which makes them more readily accessible to the kids, but then also easier to remember and more joyful in learning. Right? So that's an example of how you would fold those standards into the curriculum that we've created.
And I'll go one step further. That's where you have those rich, deep discussions, those Socratic discussions based on virtue and character, and what are the truly essential things that made up people of that time. So just throw that in there. Tiffany,
I don't want to create the impression that we don't have any textbooks. There are some classes where we do have textbooks in mathematics and in science. But even there where we have some textbooks or some sort of texts from a publisher, they are enriched and enhanced with primary source documents in the class. So where appropriate, we do use textbooks that we've adopted, but they're not state textbooks. They're textbooks that we've identified.
Great. How about Tiffany? Tiffany, can you come off of mute there to ask your question?
There we go. It wouldn't let me on my own. I have a few questions, but I'll just start with one. Tell us a little bit about your teachers. Where are they coming from? Tell us how you've chosen them, and are they unionized?
I'll take the last question first. Our teachers are not in a union. Our teachers are all at will. So are all the other employees. Mr. Iniguez and myself, we're at will employees. So if any of us are not performing, or if any of us are not doing a quality job, there's nothing that would be keeping us here, right? Any employee is able to be let go. At the same time, that requires that we take care of our staff, our teachers, our aides, all of our support staff, because at-will employees are not required to stay here. We're a school of choice for employees as well. And so they don't have contracts and they could leave at the drop of a hat. So it requires that free exchange and that willingness to enter into an agreement, right? So no union, all of our staff are at will, and that requires people to choose to be here and to perform at a high level to stay here. So hopefully that answers that question. And then as far as where our teachers are coming from, our teachers come from a variety of locations. We get a lot of teachers from traditional public schools. We have some teachers that come to us right out of teacher credentialing programs like William Jessup or other universities. So we do have some first-time teachers that are coming in and learning their teaching craft with us. But we have a lot of seasoned teachers. When we first opened our doors in 2011, we had a number of teachers that came from traditional classrooms that had been teaching for 15, 16, 17 years and were vested in Cal STRS and had all these financial incentives to stay where they were, but they loved the model, they loved the mission and vision, and they came to us because they believed in what we were doing. And we've grown to the size now where we don't really have to go out and seek teachers. Teachers are aware of us, and teachers are seeking us out. So we get them from a variety of places, but we have seasoned teachers that are coming. All of our teachers are required by law to be credentialed. So we don't have any non-credentialed teachers at any of our academies.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Lisa asks, can you tell us about sports and extracurricular activities that you offer throughout the school year? Track team, etc.
Yes, in non-COVID years, this year was a little bit of an exception. We've even been trying our best under these circumstances to try to bring sports in. So even with COVID, we're looking to have tennis, golf, some of these other sports that are not being restricted by their conference or by their sections. But we begin in middle school. Each middle school at each campus is going to be a little bit different, and same thing with high school, because the athletics are dependent upon the scholar interest and parent participation. So it all depends on which school you're at and how much interest there is in a particular sport. But we normally have boys and girls volleyball, boys and girls basketball, co-ed tennis, co-ed golf, track and field, cross country, chess team. What else am I missing, Carlos?
I think those are the biggies.
Those are the biggies. We don't have baseball, we don't have football. We just don't have the facilities for those. And so it's not likely that we would ever add those.
I'm going to correct you there. The athletic director said that was one of her dreams, is to get a baseball team.
Okay, so we might.
Yeah.
So like we do in some situations where we go and we have joint use for facilities. So if we can have a joint use on a baseball field, then we might have a baseball team. But I'm a big advocate. I love hockey, and so I'm looking to start an ice hockey team. So if anybody's interested in ice hockey, let me know. We've got Skate Town right here in Roseville, and I'm going to put that together in the next few years.
Great. Nicole, let me take you off of mute here. Would you like to ask your question?
Okay, so our kids would be 3rd and 7th coming in next year. So how do you deal with they're coming from traditional public school and moving into this program?
Yeah, so our culture, the core values really creates a culture that's very inclusive. And what we found is that the scholar body is very welcoming for new scholars that come in. There's a lot of kids here that have been in that same boat, right? Where as a school of choice, they're not all coming from the same neighborhood, right? They're all interested in making friends because this is the community, right? This is the source of community. And so we tend to see our kids kind of wrap their arms around the new ones and be very welcoming. When it comes to the academics, there is a little bit of a shift in philosophy for kids to come in because they're used to just kind of sitting and getting direct download in the traditional public school. It's not very active. They're not very engaged. So they kind of have to start exercising those scholarly muscles and start realizing that this is their education. But the teachers are very supportive, and the teachers will start drawing that out of them and start encouraging that. So once they start gaining the attitude that this is my education, then you start seeing that success, because then learning becomes fun, right? And it's mine. And they see this culture where all their peers are learning and studying. And well, gosh, everybody's reading that novel, and I know we're going to have to talk about it in class. I should probably read it because I want to be able to have something to say about it, right? And they can read it and they can sit back and they don't have to jump into the conversation. But then as they feel comfortable, next thing you know, they're offering a thought. And then that thought is accepted. And then somebody might say, yeah, I agree with John. And, I would also point to the text here, and right. And all of a sudden they start finding their way in. So there is a little bit of a transition period, but I've found that it starts with the attitude of the child at any grade level, that they're willing to try. And we've had kids that they didn't want to come here. Mom and dad enrolled them, and they were taking them out of some other situation, and they forced them into Johns Academy, and the kid did not want to be here, whether it was because they didn't want to wear the uniform or they didn't want to leave their friends at the other school, whatever it was. And over time, we've seen them go, wow, this is amazing. I love it. And I can't imagine being back in my other school, right? We hear that story a lot. Anything you want to add, Carlos?
Oh, it's just amazing. Just the scholars and the culture that they've built is so amazing. I think the other part of that is that, when you have primary sources and you're able to engage in something that isn't a one size fit all, and you have teachers who are skilled and mentors who are skilled at trying to find out, how to help a young person explore what their passion is, what they love, or what their inclination is, and we begin to draw out that special excellence that I talked about. That's really the gift. And like I said, for some of us that's art, for some of us that's music, for some of it's history, for some of us it's things we've never explored before. And we've seen kids who came to us from educational opportunities where academics weren't just prized. They just weren't prized, and kids were looked down upon because they studied or they did their homework, and they had never read before. I mean, of course they read, handout or something like that, but they had never read an original text or a story. And so, it's not uncommon for young people to start reading at levels, and we have to go, okay, you can't read when you walk down the stairs. Okay, gotta stop. You gotta take the book out of your hand, right? And really, what happens is that we fall in love with learning again, and it's just infectious. So that's a huge part of us. All right, Mr. Gonzalez, here we go. We're way down on the waiting list. This is from Lauren. We're way down on the waiting list. It's over 100. Is there any chance that you're adding in extra classes? And Laura, I'm going to ask if you'd like to come off a mute here or raise your hand and let us know which class. But Mr. Gonzalez, maybe you can give us the top.
I was just saying, if you can clarify for me grade level and which campus.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you talk to us just about the wait list in general and kind of,
Okay, so here's what I always recommend to parents, because something that's unique to charter schools is this concept of a wait list, right? If you go to your traditional public school where you live, you're mandated to attend a specific school. And because of that mandate, they're required to take everyone that lives in that attendance boundary. And they squeeze you all in to whatever class you go to, or they bus you to another school, or whatever the case may be. But at a charter school, we set a specific capacity. We say, here's how many kids we can take per classroom. And then if we have space in the class, let's say we've got a class size of 30, that tends to be the average. If we have a class size of 30 and we have 25 kids in the class, then we have 5 open seats. And anyone who applied would get an offer for that next seat. And then we'd have 4 left, right? And so each person that applied would automatically get an offer until we hit that cap of 30. Then anybody that applied after that would go on a wait list. Well, because we're so popular and because so many families want this option, we have some pretty large wait lists in grade levels, especially in elementary. And so we can see anywhere between 30 to 200 on a wait list, depending on the campus and the grade level. And a lot of times parents will get on that wait list and they will feel discouraged and they'll say, well, gosh, I'm so far down, there's no hope, let me just move on. And what I would say is don't ever be discouraged. Apply as soon as you can, get on the wait list, and then eventually you will be at the top of that list. So years ago, we had just John Adams Academy Roseville, and we had very long wait lists. And based on those wait lists, we opened other schools. And immediately we took thousands off our wait list, right? Because we were able to open these new additional schools. And not only serving them at these new campuses, but then opening space in Roseville to backfill off of our wait list. And also, as these other schools grow, we're able to take additional classes. Now, Lauren, it looks like you're at El Dorado Hills, and El Dorado Hills is not likely to be adding additional sections per grade level, so additional classes for grade levels. So the question there becomes turnover, whether people move or go to another school or choose other options. That creates vacancies throughout. So there's always some sort of movement, especially over summer. We'll see at the end of a school year that spots will open up. So depending on how far down you are, could depend on how close you get to getting an offer. And based on that, I always recommend applying to all three schools, or if all three isn't reasonable, to whichever schools you realistically could attend. So if you're closest to one school, but you could realistically attend the other school, then apply to both. If you're in a location where you could drive to all three, then apply to all three, because that increases your likelihood of getting accepted to at least one of those options. And on our wait list, we have, it's what's called a dynamic wait list. I apologize for giving you guys all this technical information. I apologize, but it helps to kind of understand how it all works. So I apologize for if I'm going too fast or giving you too much. But your position can move up or down on the wait list depending on whether or not you or someone else has an admissions preference. So there are some admissions preferences that we have to provide by law, and that's to people, applicants who live within our authorizing school district. So if you're applying to Lincoln and somebody applies and they live in the city of Lincoln in Western Placer Unified School District, they get what's called an in-district preference that would bump them above people that have no preference. We also give preferences to siblings because we want to keep families together. We want to make it easier for siblings of enrolled scholars to also get in. So you as mom and dad don't have to go to two different schools, right? And so if a scholar, if one of your children gets in, then it gives a priority to your other child who's still on the wait list, and they'll get bumped up, right? So you might be down low, but if one of your children gets in, the other child's going to jump up, and all of a sudden the whole framework completely changes for you. So we've seen situations where you might have a kindergartner and a second grader, and the second grader is way down on the list, but the kindergartner gets in the lottery and gives a sibling priority to older sibling, and they both get in, right? So my advice is always apply to as many schools as you potentially could attend, as many John Adams Academies as possible. Stay on the wait list, be patient, and if you have more than one child on the list, accept for the one that gets in and enroll them. What breaks my heart so often is a parent will decline an offer for one child because the other one can't get in yet. And what happens is you have to reapply, and that child goes all the way back down to the bottom of the list. And by the time the other one works its way up, you're never going to get two at the same time. So you've got to be willing to get one in, give the advantage to the sibling, and then be patient, and you'll eventually have them both in. What I like to say is, if John's Academy is where you would like to have your children, then do what you can to get them all in there. And if you have to have them in two different schools while you're figuring it out, do that, because that's going to give you your best option to get the second one in, or your third.
Great. It's important to add that there's consistency in program throughout our campuses. So really what you have is one school, one methodology throughout our network of schools. So each of our campuses offer that same American classical leadership education that we've described to you this evening. There are some things, you might have a sports program that's a little bit more defined in Roseville than El Dorado Hills or at Lincoln. But we've also made arrangements so that kids, if they don't have a sport, or scholars don't have a sport at that location, can participate if we have that sport at a different location. But once again, there's a consistency of program across all of our schools. So Christy, you have your hand up there. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so regarding the wait list, my son, unfortunately, he won't be able to come next year, but the following year he will, and I'm super excited. Is there a way to get on a wait list for the following school year?
So what I would say is if there is currently a wait list now, depending on how long the wait list is and what grade level it is, go ahead and apply and get on it, because sometimes it can take a year or more to work up a wait list depending on the grade level. We do see transitions in 8th grade, going from elementary school to middle school, and we see transitions from middle school to high school. I would love it if every one of our scholars stayed with us all the way through graduation, but some of our kids decide that they want to go to a traditional high school because they want to play football or they want to play baseball or they want to, tailor their high school experience to a specific school that they want to go to. For example, we had kids that left here to go to Lincoln because they wanted to do their agriculture program, right? So if you have a specific need like that, we tend to see kids go from 8th grade and leave us. So there's that natural transition point where we have seats that open up, right? Between 8th grade and 9th grade. And we see the same thing sometimes between 6th grade and 7th grade, which would start our middle school. So those are our grade span adjustments that create opportunities for families to come off the wait list.
My son is he'll almost be 4, so he's not ready for kindergarten yet, but that's why I was wondering for the next.
So in that situation, you would not be able to apply until he's school age.
Okay.
So yeah, you can't get on a wait list earlier because there are birth date restrictions. There's minimum ages for attending school in California. So
Okay.
he would just need to apply when he's going to be turning 5 that next school year, and he could apply to either TK or kindergarten depending on when his birthday is.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Norman, can you talk to us a little bit about STEM programming or math and science specific programming?
Yeah, so we are a classical leadership education model. We are not a STEM model. So if you were to go to a school that focuses on STEM, those STEM schools, that's what their curriculum is designed around, right? So their philosophy, their curriculum is built around those science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We have science and technology, but that's not the focus of our program. Our focus is a liberal arts education. But we do have high-level mathematics. We offer all the way up to calculus. We also have science that goes, I believe, to physics. If I'm correct, we go all the way to physics. So we do serve the sciences. We also have scholars that are interested in the STEM fields that want to study that in college that maybe with us and taking some of those additional courses through junior college or online college courses while they're here to get those additional higher level engineering classes for them. But we are a liberal arts classical education, but we do have the science and the mathematics embedded within that.
Great. And Christy asked, can we get on a wait list for next year? And then again, what is the teacher student ratio? So now you covered teacher student ratio with TK, but there are 2 questions there.
Yeah, the teacher student ratio depends on grade levels. We tend to have some smaller class sizes in high school. So it ranges anywhere from 15 to 1 to 30 to 1. It depends on the class and how many kids are enrolled in that particular class. But we cap our classes at 30. So you're not going to see classes over 30 unless for some reason there was an enrollment issue. But for elementary, our standard class sizes are going to be 30 because those are self-contained classrooms and they're set. They're not moving back and forth in elementary. And so you're going to see classes of 30 with a teacher and an instructional aide. But then when you get into kindergarten, as I said earlier, you're going to have class sizes of 30 with 2 teachers and an instructional aide. And then TK would be class sizes of 25 with 2 teachers and an aide.
Excellent. Thank you. Will there be a lottery for kinder this fall? And if so, when will it occur? And how many kinder classes are available? Maybe you can kind of go through the various campuses.
There are almost always kindergarten lotteries for TK and kinder. And Mr. Inigas, you just set up those meetings. So which days do we have our lotteries? We're going to be determining this next week whether or not we need lotteries for not only kindergarten, but any other grade levels. And then at that point, we will send out messages to anybody who has applied as to whether or not there's a lottery. So to apply, all you need to do is go on johnsacademy.org, click on the admissions tab and click on the enrollment and admissions. And then there's a link to a program called SchoolMint. And you would just apply, you would create an account and apply to our school there via SchoolMint. And then again, apply to as many of the campuses as you realistically could actually attend. Then if there's a lottery required for your grade level, we would send you a communication on that probably next week. And then if there's no lottery, that's because we don't have space and there's an existing wait list. You would go on the wait list and SchoolMint would tell you what your wait list number is.
And the lottery dates are going to be March 2nd for Roseville at 10 a.m. via Zoom. For Lincoln will be March 3rd at 10 a.m. via Zoom. And then for El Dorado Hills, it'll be the 4th at 10 a.m. via Zoom. All that will be communicated out here within the next day or so.
And it's also important to note that you do not have to be present either in person or on Zoom. You don't have to be present to receive a spot. The lottery is random. It's a random drawing. It selects through anybody that applied during our application window for the lottery, which ends the 19th. So if you've not yet applied and you want to make sure you're included in a lottery, if a lottery is required, make sure you apply before Friday, because then anybody that applies by Friday has just as much opportunity or chance of getting selected in the lottery, regardless of whether you attend via Zoom or not. And after the lottery is concluded, we will email the results out to folks to let you know.
Great. And then Nicole asked whether we offer a life skills class. And Norman, if you don't mind, I'll take this one. And I'd like to say that we don't specifically offer a life skills class. Sometimes in mentoring, we do have some things that are geared towards life skills. But if you really think about it, an American classical leadership education is really a life skills education, in that we focus on primary sources and we use the great mentors of history to answer those compelling questions of life. And we do so by examining those questions through our core values and our mission. And once again, this call to servant leadership to figure out how we serve others better. So in a sense, you have a program that's really built on life skills. And so oftentimes in education, we have things like positive behavior environments and things like that are additional to an education program. Here at the Academy, it's part of our foundational programming. I will tell you that that our counseling department does a great job of continuing to put resources in the hands of our scholars and to train our teachers. We have a very trauma-informed environment. Our scholars have a very adept skill at being able to access supports and to be able to know that the counseling office exists. And there's some peer-to-peer mentoring that I know that they're going to be working on for next year, because there's a lot of interruption of academics and social emotional regulation, especially in this last year or so. So I know that our team is hard at work with already the professional development for the rest of this year, and then also too looking into next year as we welcome more new scholars on campus on just how we use these lessons throughout history to help propel us and make us the best servant leaders possible. So Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, Aaron says they're having trouble with the website and the application process for the lottery. Is there an alternate method to apply?
Yeah, so if you're having trouble getting online, you're probably doing this exact same thing I'm doing. We just had a new website rollout in the last couple of days, and now I can't even get on our website half the time. What you want to do is when you type johnadamsacademy.org, you might be getting a message that says invalid host. If you, a couple workarounds for that, if you type https:// and then johnadamsacademy.org, it should take you to the website. Another workaround is type johnadamsacademy.com and it should redirect you to the proper website. Try one of those two things and let me know if that's working, and then you should be able to go to the admissions tab and then find the right link.
Excellent. Kelly, would you like to come off of mute and to ask your question, please?
Yeah, just on the lottery, I have 5 kids, 4 are on the wait list. One won't be ready for kindergarten until not next year, but the following year. Will he have to be in the lottery, or since he has siblings that hopefully will be accepted, does he get priority in the lottery?
So if you have a sibling that's already currently enrolled and attending in John Adams Academy, then there'd be a sibling admissions preference in the lottery.
So that doesn't apply towards kindergarten, then you're saying? If like I have a first grader and then a kindergarten coming in, the kindergartner doesn't have to do the lottery.
No, everyone has to go through the lottery, but they receive an admissions preference in the lottery.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so it increases the likelihood of being selected because of that admissions preference.
Got it. That's all.
Yeah, provided
Thank
that the first grader is enrolled and attending, then yes.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Mr. Gonzalez, Patricia asked, what is the schedule like, and are kids going full-time or partial? Are they required to wear masks?
So a lot of questions that we get right now for current year may not even apply to next fall, right? So so our expectation is that for next fall, we're going to be back to normal. We're going to be regular class sizes. We're going to be in person and full day, right? That's our hope. And that's what we're planning and anticipating. Current year, because of state restrictions, we're not able to do that, right? So it was really important for us to open in person as soon as we could and serve families. The only way we could do that under current state restrictions was to offer a half-day model. So we're 5-day-a-week instruction currently, but that 5-day-a-week instruction is a minimum day, so from 8 to 12:30. We had to do that in order to allow our teachers to be able to support those that were on distance learning, because we're utilizing the same teachers to support those from their classroom that are at home doing distance learning, as well as those that are in person. And they couldn't physically be doing both at the same time. So our morning schedule is for the in-person learners, and then the afternoon is for the distance learners. Under the current requirements from the state, everyone is required to wear face coverings, and they do have to have them on the full time that they're here. That's been an issue and a concern for families. It's been an issue and a concern for us, because the most recent state guidance to try to quote unquote get schools reopened are also impacting those of us that are already open. Everyone's required to follow these new mandates, and they're almost unmanageable as far as the spacing and distancing and those types of things. But it's a challenge that I hope will go away as the medical situation improves, and as the state is able to roll back some of these requirements and mandates, and then as people are vaccinated, and as we get past the current status of the pandemic. Our expectation is that next fall is a pretty long way out, and that we should see a significant improvement that would allow us to open back up under normal circumstances.
Great. Mike, you have a question? Mike Mazzy. Doesn't look like your audio's on. Your hand is raised. I tell you what, come back to me or try me in the chat if you're unable to come off of, looks like your audio is not engaged there. So this is a great question. Does the John Adams Academy have summer camps or summer programs? Looks like that's
we
Mike's
haven't
question.
historically done summer school. That is something that we're looking at adding. That is something that we may add in the future as an enhancement, would be summer school. We have in the past done summer camps. So we've had teachers that have independently done week-long camps around science, around art, music, those types of things, so that the kids could enroll. And that was facilitated directly by teachers independently. And then parents paid the teacher directly for those camps. We also partner at all of our campuses with a third-party entity called Champions. Champions provides before and after school care during the school year, and they also provide summer programming as well. So if parents were looking for that year-round support around the child care, that is available through Champions. They have their own curriculum, they have their own activities and engagement that they'd be able to keep the kids busy with. And that information about Champions should also be available on our website as well.
Great. And then considering the individuality of each student, how are academics modified for advanced scholars?
Well, that would depend on the scholar and the teacher and the parents, right? So, so throughout the year, there are ongoing assessments, not just, end of term grades, but we have what's called an iReady exam. iReady is used to test on the knowledge of the state standards and see kind of where those kids are tracking based on grade level for those standards expectations. And there's other resources, assessments that teachers will use, observation, engagement. And so it would depend on the teachers and the parents and the scholar as to what kind of additional challenges or supports they provided to individual scholars. One thing I will say is that our policy is not to skip or advance kids a grade. We want to keep the kids with their age appropriate peers, because what you tend to see is kids will ebb and flow in expertise over something. They might get something before their peers, but then struggle with something later. They might be really advanced in one particular subject, but not advanced in another. And so we want to keep them with their age appropriate peers so that they're continuing to learn, and be in the right place emotionally and behaviorally, as well as then finding additional ways to challenge them academically. And so there would be an individual plan that would be created for that child, just like we would have an individual plan created to support a scholar that might be struggling, right? So those same types of conversations would be happening, and those same types of interventions would be brought to bear to challenge and push a child forward, just like we would be to support and buoy up a scholar that needs additional supports.
Yeah, Mr. Gonzalez, I will add that this question often comes up, and we see this in education a lot, because kids are often given busy work. So you have a kid that excels, and then the teacher has a hard time because she's trying to meet the needs of other scholars as well as the kids who are advanced. And so we just end up giving a lot of worksheets or things that really just, in a sense, give them more work as opposed to something that they can really dig in. And this is where our focus on primary sources really helps us out in that regard. A classical education is by nature something that allows us to go deeper, especially based on our passions. And as Mr. Gonzalez had mentioned, that not only goes for how subjects were advanced in, but also too the subjects that we struggle in. So oftentimes we might have a great acumen for mathematics, but we struggle in our English language arts. And so using our natural passions, knowing a scholar's needs and their desires, and more importantly, the things that they love to do, and using the lens of the language that they love using themselves is a great gateway in order to continue to challenge and help a scholar excel rather than just giving them extra work. So Lauren, do you want to come off unmute there and ask another question?
Yes, thank you. We had the question earlier about the waitlisted first grader. And you made a comment that brought up a second question. Our kindergartner was quote unquote accepted, not put on a wait list. I'm assuming that's because of the lottery for all kindergartners. If the kindergartner is accepted and admitted through the lottery, does that mean that our waitlisted first grader that's 180 on the list gets that sibling preference?
Yes. So do you have the kindergartner that would be going through the lottery this coming session, just in a few weeks?
Correct. Yeah, she's 4, would be going into kindergarten.
Yeah. So if you had your kindergartner accepted in the lottery, and if she received an offer, and you accepted that offer and completed the enrollment documents, then your first grader would get a sibling priority, and that would bump them up on the wait list. So they'd go from 180 to something else, right? I don't know what it would be because I'd have to look at what the actual wait list looked like, but they would fall somewhere amongst the other siblings based on when they applied and how many people were in that sibling priority. So
Great.
if I've got 10 other siblings and they all applied before your daughter, then your daughter would go at the bottom of that sibling group, but above the next group, right? If that makes sense. And if she applied before those other people that had sibling priority, then she'd be at the top of that group of siblings.
Okay, and one of the suggestions that you made was to apply to as many campuses as possible. If we did have our kindergarten accepted at El Dorado Hills, and our first grader, if we expanded it to include Roseville, would that mean that we could potentially have 2 accepted at different locations, or would they, the one that got accepted to El Dorado Hills be able to be moved to Roseville? If, just looking at scenarios here.
Yeah. The sibling priority would attach to the school where the child's enrolled. So if the kindergartner got into El Dorado Hills, then that would affect the wait list for El Dorado Hills. It wouldn't affect the wait list for Lincoln or Roseville. So you would be more inclined to get into EDH because of that preference. The school site where we probably have the most opportunity to pull people off the wait list is Lincoln right now, because Lincoln, we just built a brand new facility, a beautiful facility that we opened this year for the first year, and we're still growing and still adding scholars. And so we have the potential of adding additional classes and grade levels for Lincoln that we don't have the ability to do in El Dorado Hills and Roseville. So that's why I say if you're near Roseville, then we're a hop, skip, and a jump from Lincoln. Apply to Lincoln too, right? But if you're over on the 50 corridor and EDH is much more convenient for you, and then it'd be kind of like a stretch to get over to Roseville, I don't know if Lincoln becomes an option, right? And I don't know if you want to have one in EDH and one in Lincoln. That would become a quality of life issue. But if you got your kindergartner in, then that would greatly increase and enhance the opportunity of getting your older scholar in.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez, we're going to bump up against time here. So I think rather than taking one more question, what we'll do is we will let folks know if they want to ask a question that we didn't answer during this session, that you can email us at outreach@johnadamsacademy.org. Once again, that's outreach@johnadamsacademy.org. And we will try to get your questions answered as soon as possible. I will tell you that we're up against the end of a week, and we have several things going on early next week. So it may take a day, anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to answer any questions in detail. In fact, you might just get a call from one of us, because it might be easier than giving you a big 2-page multi-answer email. So we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have. So please, once again, if we didn't answer questions tonight, please email us at outreach@johnadamsacademy. And then Mr. Gonzalez, I noticed that we actually have a teacher that's joining us from the Lincoln campus anonymously. I was just asked, Anonymous Mouse.
Well, it sounds like they were trying to join anonymously until you just outed them.
I know, but she had a great comment just regarding the amount of scholars that we had an increase of so many scholars. Anonymous Mouse, do you want to speak to that? Having not heard, let's see there. Let's try that. Okay, doesn't look like we're coming off on mute, but her point was that we had a huge influx of scholars at the Lincoln campus, and it seems to be going very well. And so it's the teacher speaking very highly of the amount of scholars that we received and how well the campus is doing. Great. So, Mr. Gonzalez, that is all I have. Once again, if you'd like to close us out here, we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to thank all of the parents and families for being with us on this call tonight. It warms my heart because this is something that I think is a really great option for families. And we always say that even though we represent a charter school, even though we work for Johns Academy, which is a charter, we are not charter school advocates. We're parental right and parental choice advocates. We think that every parent should have the right to choose the best educational option for their kids, no matter what it is. And we're just glad to be a choice and an option for your family. And hopefully, you're able to get in and experience this and that it would work out for you. So the fact that we're here and the fact that you're here is amazing. So thank you for that. And if there's a way that we can be a resource for you to provide additional information, that's what we're here for. We want to help you and support you in your pursuit of the best option for your children.
Well, that concludes our event. So folks, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to having you become part of the John Adams Academy, and we look forward to seeing you on campus really soon. Have a great evening.